Rome, the beating heart of an empire, dazzled with marble columns, golden frescoes, and aqueducts stretching for miles, yet beneath this grandeur lay a world of filth, human waste, and odors that assaulted every sense, from the moment a citizen woke up in an insular, the apartment buildings of the urban poor, the floors littered with rotting food, animal feces, and decomposing matter, to the crowded streets where pigs, goats, and stray dogs mingled with humans. Dirt and grime were unavoidable. Dust clung to sweat-drenched skin, and lice and fleas scuttled through hair, clothing, and bedding, carrying bacteria and disease that no oil or perfume could fully mask. Mourning rituals began with baths for those who could afford it, yet even the wealthy faced hazards. Bathing complexes, with frigidaria, tepidaria, caldaria, and sudatoria, were crowded with dozens of citizens at once. All shared the same water, often only partially replaced or heated inadequately, creating an invisible soup of bacteria, mold, fungi, and parasites. Floors were perpetually wet, promoting fungal growth, and condensation dripped from ceilings onto human bodies, strigils scraped, skin coated with sweat, oil, and dirt, yet the same strigil might be passed from person to person, spreading lice, scabies, and bacterial infections, oils and perfumes, while masking odors, trapped grime against the skin, intensifying microbial growth. Archaeological studies show that baths preserved traces of fungal spores and intestinal parasites for decades, evidence of the microscopic horror bathing failed to eliminate. Public latrines were equally grim. Long benches with holes lined the walls, sometimes accommodating 30 to 50 people at once. The excrement fell into shallow channels or cesspits, which were rarely flushed, creating stagnant, odorous pools. A shared tesorium, a sponge on a stick, soaked in water or reused urine, was the only cleaning tool, transmitting intestinal worms and bacteria among users. The wealthy, despite private latrines, were not immune, as splashes, flies, and poor drainage ensured contamination remained constant. The Cloaker Maximer and other sores, engineering marvels, carried excrement, household waste, and thrown objects, yet the combination became a breeding ground for pathogens, and the smell from open vents and sore mouths permeated entire neighborhoods. Water, a supposed symbol of cleanliness, was itself treacherous. Aqueducts brought millions of liters daily, yet sediments, debris, and excrement often contaminated the supply. Public fountains doubled as drinking sources, washing stations, and collection points for urine used in textile bleaching, perpetuating cycles of contamination citywide. Even elite villas faced risk. Cisterns contained sediments and microbial growth, and lead piping added chronic poisoning hazards. Romans had no concept of microbes, only observing digestive upset or skin irritation, adjusting practices through trial rather than science. Falarniki, the laundry workshops, were centers of both scent and horror. Human urine, rich in ammonia, was collected in amphorae and poured into vats, where workers stomped barefoot on soiled fabrics to degrease and bleach them. Exposure to bacteria, excrement, and chemical irritants was constant. Water stagnated. Fabrics appeared clean but remained microbiologically active. Streets were lined with jars collecting urine, a resource for laundering but also a vast, city-wide reservoir of potentially infectious liquid. Romans obsessed with appearance applied oils, scented powders, and sometimes toxic substances like lead or mercury to the skin. Hair was shaved, combed, and perfumed, yet lice and fleas thrived despite these treatments. Massages with strigils moved dirt around but rarely eliminated it. Armpits, pubic hair, and scalp were frequent breeding grounds for parasites. Bathing, despite being socially desirable, was more about ritual and display than sanitation. The lower-class insulae were overcrowded and poorly ventilated. Floors were layered with trash, decomposing food, animal excrement, and other refuse. Streets doubled as refuse sites and sewage conduits. Animals added feces to the mess. Smells were overpowering. Infections were constant. Lice and fleas infested inhabitants, while intestinal parasites spread through water, food, and shared facilities. Even in public baths, intended as temples of hygiene and social ritual, the reality was grim. Floors were scrubbed with mixtures of urine, oil, and ash, leaving behind sticky, pungent residues that clung to skin and stone. Pools, despite appearing clear, contained layers of sweat, hair, oils, and trace urine, creating a microbial soup teeming with bacteria, fungi, and intestinal worms. In Caldaria, water barely filtered and replaced infrequently, the crowd pressing shoulder to shoulder, rubbing oils and dirt, each person unknowingly transferring lice, scabies, and bacterial colonies. Steam rooms, humid and hot, became incubators for fungal infections and skin diseases, while the Romans believed baths purified the body. Each visit amplified exposure to invisible pathogens. Social pressure required attendance, making disease a communal, unavoidable companion. Outside the baths, streets were a mosaic of filth and human activity. The smell of excrement, decaying food, sweat, and animal waste was omnipresent. Vendors washed vegetables in polluted water. Meat markets discarded entrails directly onto streets. Stray pigs and goats scavenged freely. Children played barefoot, digging in mud that contained feces and rotting refuse. Hookworms, roundworms, and other parasites were easily transmitted. Adults navigated the same streets, stepping in human and animal waste, handling coins covered in grime, brushing against neighbors in the crowd. Each sensory experience, the stink, the stickiness of mud, the constant crawling of lice, defined daily life in the city. Even private homes offered little relief. Floors and bedding were infested with lice and fleas. Kitchens harbored rats and mice. Cooking and drinking water often came from wells or fountains contaminated by latrine overflow. Flies carried bacteria from refuse to food. Food left unrefrigerated spoiled in hours in the Mediterranean sun. Families shared utensils, bathwater, and clothing, perpetuating microbial exposure within households. Disease and parasites were normal aspects of daily life, shaping mortality rates and childhood health, while the elite buffered risk with private baths, lead pipes, and better food. They could not escape lice, flies, or the ever-present microbial fog. Archaeological evidence confirms this grim reality. Intestinal worms like whipworm and roundworm were found in latrine pits across Rome. Lice combs and hairpins reveal near-universal scalp infestations. Fungal spores from baths persisted in stone for decades. Lead poisoning from plumbing contributed to chronic health issues among the wealthy. Even the best ventilated villas could not escape rats, mice, and flies. Life expectancy for the urban poor was drastically reduced, and disease persisted constantly for all social classes. The paradox of Rome was striking. Architectural brilliance, monumental sculptures, and aqueducts coexisted with pervasive odors, parasites, and human waste. Baths, latrines, aqueducts, and Falarniki created a facade of hygiene while disease and microbial life thrived invisibly. Citizens navigated streets coated in filth, lungs assaulted by stench, bodies crawling with lice, fleas, and invisible intestinal parasites. Yet, social rituals and appearances demanded cleanliness. Oils, perfumes, baths, and public latrines masked microbial reality. Rome's splendor was inseparable from the disgusting conditions beneath its veneer of sophistication. Even at night, the city remained a theater of contamination. Open gutters fermented in the moonlight, the odor of waste mixing with cooking fires. Rats and stray animals roamed streets scavenging. Citizens returning from baths carried lice and parasites back to homes. Bedding and clothing remained infested. Water left in containers overnight developed microbial growth. Flies settled on leftovers, contaminating meals. Every breath, touch, and sip of water carried risk. Yet life, commerce, and social interaction persisted. The Romans adapting to filth as an invisible background, accepting it as part of urban life. The grandeur of Rome was inseparable from the invisible horrors of its streets, homes, baths, and public works, a city of both splendor and pervasive, relentless microbial horror.